Hi, this is Steve Rigolosi, Editorial Dude, and I am back with another video. It's been a while, so hello everyone. So I have posted in the past a video that I titled Things That Readers Hate. So I suppose you could say that doing the opposite of all of those things would then help you compile a list of things that readers love. And I think that would be a fair thing to say. Nonetheless, I have put together this completely separate video on things that readers love. And so I offer this as advice to all writers out there, regardless of whether you're writing nonfiction, fiction, or anything else, although I'm pretty sure everything fits into one of those two categories. So this advice comes based not only on my editorial likes and what I do as I edit and what I look for, but also on reading many, many reviews and lurking on many listservs and reading many blogs and just keeping my ears open for what people like and don't like. And by people, I mean readers, the most important people in the world. So let me get started with my list, and then I'll close with a recommendation for a writer that I really like and hope you will like too. So number one on the list of reader likes and editorial likes is structure. So by structure, I mean the edifice on which the book is built. So in fiction, you can think of your structure as being your plot and the revelation of details as you move forward. And in nonfiction, you can think of your structure as your outline. And a lot of people haven't really thought about outlines since their high school or college composition class. To many, they seem like something that is old or, one of those things you learn in school that's pretty useless or has no real-world application. But most writers will tell you that, particularly of nonfiction, you need to have a very strong structure. Thinking in terms of that Roman numeral 1, and then A, and then Arabic 1, and then small a, and so forth. And plotting out your topics, your major details, and your minor details, and having that all in front of you and prepared before you even write your first word. I know that there are writers of fiction who talk about, these words are kind of funny, plotters and pantsers. Plotters are those, such as myself, who like to have every detail of the plot worked out in their heads before they start writing. And pantsers, that means sort of writing or flying by the seat of your pants, means noodling away on your keyboard and letting the plot come to you as it will. And I've even heard this method of writing called writing on the wind. And I love both those phrases. I personally would never do them. I'm much too anal as a writer and editor to deal well with pantsing or writing on the wind. But with nonfiction, you really can't write on the wind. You can't be a pantser. People who read nonfiction need structure. They need an organization to help them make sense of volumes of information that you as the writer are trying to distill into a book. And, a lot of readers will preview a book by turning to a table of contents, looking at what's covered, seeing if the topics they hope to see are covered. And if they don't see them in that table of contents, there's a good chance that they will put the book down or not purchase it, or, by extension, not read it. So your structure helps you telegraph to your audience exactly what you're going to say and in the order that you're going to say it. And so when you think about your structure, I would recommend thinking about it right down to the level of the examples you're going to give or the research that you're going to cite. Everything, I swear to you, falls into place when you have a good outline. And readers love it too, because they feel that you as the writer have taken such a gigantic topic, and every topic, even the tiniest, could also be considered gigantic in its own way. So if you take a gigantic topic and bring order to the madness for your readers, they will really love you. It's structure is one of those things that you may not notice it when it's there and when it's good, but you definitely notice when it's not there, and it typically does not lead to a good reading experience. I can give an example without naming names. There is a series of books, nonfiction. It's a branded series. They're tables of contents. And I have about 10 of these books for reasons I won't get into. They were basically given to me. They're terrible. The books are terrible. They're organized really poorly. When you look through the table of contents, you don't see any topic that you as a novice would expect to see or might be interested in reading about. And they also suffer from really poor indexes. And so if you can't find information about a topic, either in the table of contents or the index, you've got a problem. And these books, as I understand it, don't do as well as other books of that genre. I've heard it called prescriptive nonfiction. And frankly, I can see why, because they're not good. The content in them is all right, but they are structured quite poorly. And that's all I'm going to say about them, because, like I said, I don't want to name names, but structure. The big S, never forget it. Okay, number 2 things that readers really like is visual cues. So, whether readers are reading fiction or nonfiction, they like cues on the page that signal them what is about to happen or what they're reading, or that signal a transition of some sort. So, a couple of examples just off the top of my head. In nonfiction, various levels of headings. Their content, they have their words, they say things, but they also signal a visual break, that you're moving from one topic to another, or that you're transitioning from one idea to another, or moving from one example to another. In short, they're telling the reader that something is ending and a new thing, which may be a subset of the other thing, is starting. And it just gives the reader time to reorient their brain to what is going to be there on the page. And they really appreciate it. In fiction, there are also visual cues. There aren't really a lot of subheadings in fiction, but there are a lot of narrative techniques out there that are available that are very interesting and very intriguing to read. I like, as a reader, intriguing or different uses or unexpected uses of different narrative techniques. That's something that turns me on. I like when I see someone do something that I haven't seen done before. But some ideas that I can mention off the top of my head are, a lot of books will be told from several points of view. there might be, say, chapters that alternate third person, first person, third person, first person. Some books, you will have multiple first person narrators. And I think it's important to signal these changes visually somehow. A lot of books do this simply by starting a new chapter. Or if you have two narrators, A and B, Aaron and Beth, you put the word Aaron on Aaron's chapters and you put the word Beth on Beth's chapters. It seems like a small point, but it's helpful to the reader to orient them to what is about to happen on the page. I read a novel, I'm going to say earlier this year, but it's 2018, so it was last year, that had 3 first-person narrators. And I didn't know it until about page 100. And when I realized it, I thought, how did you miss that, Steve? Are you, like Italians would say, stunad? Are you stunad? How did you miss this? You think of yourself as, a professional editor and reader, and this completely went over your head. When I look back, I realized the author just didn't do a good job of differentiating the voices, and that's why I didn't know. But if he had put the narrator's name at the top, at the start of each chapter, that would have been a visual cue that really would have helped. And I probably would not have been quite so irritated with the author if he had done that, because who as a reader wants to feel dumb? And I felt dumb and unperceptive when I didn't realize that there were 3 different narrators until 100 pages into a very long and not very good book. So think in terms of the visual cues. Chapter breaks. There can be, breaks within a chapter with space or some little doodad or some design element. There are lots of ways to do it. A theme of a lot of these videos that I make is always to really think about your reader's experience first and foremost. Writers, and I'm one, so I speak from that perspective too. Talk so much about the writing process and what goes on with writing. And those are all very valid conversations. I don't really blog about writing because I think there's a million people who do it better than I do. But I do think there needs to be a passionate amount of attention to the reader's experience, no matter what you're writing. And visual cues are a part of that. Okay, number 3. That readers like. Paragraphs of reasonable length. Seems, pretty, I think, obvious, but not always. So on the one hand, you have books that are composed almost exclusively of paragraphs of 1 to 3 sentences. And then on the more academic or scholarly side of things, you can have books that have paragraphs that go on for pages. So with those super short paragraphs, the challenge is that you really may not be able to develop an idea or a character. And the problem with those super long paragraphs is, even the person who has the best attention span can find his or her attention wandering in a paragraph that goes on for 10 pages. These serpentine paragraphs. Not good. So whenever I'm editing and I come across one of those really long paragraphs, I always suggest dividing it into at least 2, sometimes 3, 4, 5 paragraphs and so forth. Again, because I'm thinking about the reader's experience. Give them the information that they want, develop the idea, but don't overtax them cognitively. But also don't insult them by implying with a series of 5,000 one-sentence paragraphs that they're not very smart and can't make too many linkages and aren't capable of holding more than the simplest idea possible in their head at one time. So, but it all depends on how you do it, right? So I'm thinking about a writer who uses a lot of very short paragraphs is James Ellroy. Here's one of his books, American Tabloid. Huge book. I don't know if you'll be able to see the inside of it. I'll try to hold it up to the camera, but you can see how short the paragraphs are. James Ellroy can pull this off. His paragraphs, even though they're short, are dense with ideas. And so you would think, oh, these books would be fast to read, but they're not. They're actually quite challenging, I think. And Ellroy's also extremely dark and not for everybody, but he can do it. Ellroy can pull it off. I'm thinking of another book that I read a couple of years ago, and I so wish I could tell you what it is, because like, that book deserves to be burned. It's so bad and so insulting to any adult's intelligence. I don't really believe it should be burned, but it's just short of that. No paragraph is longer than 3 sentences. Most are 2 sentences. I'd say maybe a third of the paragraphs in the book end with an exclamation point. It's so, if we think about the dumbing down of society, or what some people have accused as being the dumbing down of society, that book is it. It's derivative, it's sophomoric, it assumes the reader is kind of a dummy. And I just found it to be one of the worst books I've ever read. And I think I did pretty well, and I'd love to tell you what it is, but I don't do that here. I've mentioned in the past, I'm a tough critic. So when I love something, I talk about loving it. But when I don't like something, I often feel strongly about that as well. And I thought that book was just the perfect example of how short paragraphs and bad writing lead to an awful reading experience. And when I look up the reviews on Goodreads and Amazon, a preponderance of 2-star and 1-star reviews, which to me is proof that the American public is not dumb. You don't, just isn't. So don't make the mistake of assuming that. Okay, number 4. Chapters of appropriate length. And here we get to length issues again. But again, it's so important for the reader's experience. So, we've all seen books that are a series of fairly brief chapters, anywhere between 1 and 5 pages. And that can work extremely well in thrillers, mystery, suspense books, where there's a constant shifting viewpoint, or you have to keep juggling a bunch of balls simultaneously, and you want to give the reader those visual cues that I mentioned earlier, or, that we're switching scenes, we're switching characters, we're switching perspectives, what have you. And that works really well. There are very few places where I think super long chapters work well. I've read books where chapters are 50 or 60 pages long with no visual breaks. That just makes readers tired. You feel your eyes getting heavy, 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 and you're just like, oh, I just want to finish this chapter so I can go to bed, but it refuses to end. Please, for the love of God, end. And it just keeps going and going and going. And again, that's, maybe those chapters were okay back in the day when people did not have a million things warring for their attention in the electronic era. But that's not now. And so I don't think these ultra-long chapters now work particularly well for the reasons that I just mentioned. I read a book just, I don't know, maybe a month or two ago, quite long, and the chapters went on forever. I mean, the book itself was a doorstop. And the length of these chapters just made it seem that much longer. I didn't really enjoy that book. And this video is turning into all the books that I didn't like. I didn't mean it to be that, but that's what it's turning out to be. But I think of them as cautionary tales, right? Things, they teach me or remind me of things not to do or what readers don't like. And the pacing on that book was pretty slow to begin with. If the chapters hadn't been so bloody long, the pace would have been better, and that book really would have benefited from better pacing and being cut by about 300 pages. Which leads me very nicely, nice segue, into point number 5. No, I'm going to have to skip ahead to number 6 and go back to 5 because my segue isn't as good as I had thought it would be. Pleasure proportional to length. So anybody who's watched any of these videos knows that I'm constantly riding my hobby horse of making sure books are not too long, that they don't have excess anything. No excess words, no excess scenes, no excess verbiage, no excess anything. And I'm a firm believer, again, because I feel as an editor, I'm the reader's advocate, that the size of the book, the pleasure derived from a book, has to be proportional to the size of that book, which means that the bigger the book, the better it needs to be, right? So you can get away with being okay in 200 pages. You can't get away with being okay in 1,000 pages. So regardless of whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction, get readers, have people honestly tell you, and your editor will be one of these people, to tell you whether your work is too long, whether it's overstaying its welcome or causing people to tune out or for their eyes to go bleary because you've just overwritten and you haven't been able to get the book down to the right length for what readers want it to be. So now we'll go back to number 5. A pleasant author photo. How's that for something unexpected? So, like you, I always look at author photos. I just want to know what my peeps look like. And a lot of people have very nice portraits done by professional photographers, and they look very, very nice. Often photoshopped to the nth degree. You see the person and you think, wow, you look nothing at all like that photo on the jacket. But listen, it's America, right? I mean, the author photo could be considered a marketing element of the jacket, right? Everybody wants a nice looking author. But when I say a pleasant author photo, this is something I detected from reading reviews. It never occurred to me consciously. It never really made a dent on my mind until I started seeing people commenting about this in reviews. Sometimes you will notice writers' photos that are, for lack of a better word, pretentious looking. Hard to give any specific example, although I can think of several, where there's a pretentious pose or the author is in costume, or there's a difference between dressing up and wanting to look nice in your author photo and doing something that makes people think, wow, you really look full of yourself, or what's up with that? Or, if the photo doesn't make people think, oh, how nice and pleasant, it may have the opposite effect where you think, wow, I haven't read this book and I don't like the way the author looks, so I may choose not to buy it. Believe me, it happens. That happens. Look on Amazon, look on Goodreads. You will see reviews that state, I picked up the book. When I saw the author's picture, I said, I've got no interest in reading this book because the pose or whatever just turned the reader off. I mean, readers are sensitive and have their trigger points, as do we all. So when you're asked for a publicity photo or an author photo for a jacket or back cover or a website or anywhere, be very careful with that. Have friends, loved ones, family members, people you trust say, this is a good photo, you look good in this, this is the one I'd use, versus, or not so much. I would not go with that one. Right? Because you represent your book, and you don't want to do anything to make readers think, I want nothing to do with this author who looks pretentious and annoying. Okay, last item that I think readers really like in books. I know I do. It's another one of my hobby horses. Morality. Entire treatises could be written about morality or the lack thereof in our society today. But I believe that readers of both fiction and nonfiction like a moral center in a book. Even if you're writing, say, nonfiction about what happened on Wall Street that led up to the Great Recession, or other bad expose type things, in our world. Readers are looking for that good guy or good gal who has, a basic morality, a basic sense of humanity about them, because they want someone that they can root for. And, this is also very, very true in fiction, right? You want someone, they can be, fiction is interesting because the person can have done bad things, be a criminal, but also have a morality about him or her. That can make for a very interesting fiction reading experience. Readers don't like being asked to root for immoral characters. And so you've got to be really careful about that. A couple of years ago, I'm trying to think about how I can tell this story in a vague enough way. A publisher had asked me to evaluate a manuscript because there was a lot of controversy in-house over whether they were going to buy it or not. And so they asked me, would you give us your unfettered opinion on whether we should buy this book or not? So I'm like, sure, pay me and I'll do whatever you want. That's probably not the most moral thing one could say, but I took that job realizing that the stakes were pretty high for the writer. I don't think my decision made the final decision or not. But I read the manuscript, and it was provocative. It was interesting. It was well written. It was so much the kind of thing that I like to read. and it's a huge but. The protagonist throughout the entire book is doing something very, very immoral. Something that is, in no way can what that protagonist was doing be justified. Like you think of Jean Valjean stealing a loaf of bread and, to feed his family, that can be justified. But what this protagonist was doing could not be justified on any grounds. And that was the problem that, several of the publishers' staff was having with the book. And ultimately, I came down on the side of no. I think that readers will have such a hard time with this character and will feel so frustrated by wanting to like the character and root for the character and being unable to do so because this behavior was reprehensible. So I voted no. I wrote a 10-page report in which I explained all the reasons for no. And that publisher did not buy the book. It did get bought. I felt bad, it's awful. Writers work so hard, to have it come down to that decision moment and see the kibosh being put on something. It's really heartbreaking. There was a happy ending for the writer. It did get bought at a different publishing house, and it was published, and I don't know how it did. I suspect okay or a little less than okay. But I did look up the reviews afterwards, and many of them were quite negative due to the lead character's lack of morality. So, give us someone good and decent and ethical to root for, and we as readers will love you. Okay, so speaking of good, decent, ethical characters that we'd like to root for, I'm going to close with a recommendation for one of my favorite mystery writers who has been in the game a very, very long time. He is a grandmaster, and his name is Bill Pronzini. Here is one of his earlier books. His series character is the nameless detective, who was nameless for many years until, in recent memory, maybe the last 10 years, it might be a little bit longer than that or shorter, his name has been revealed to be Bill, much like the authors, which I love. I love that. So here's an early entry. Shackles, like I said. Here's another one. Deadfall. That's better. No glare. And then his current publisher has used a series design for, I want to say, the last 10 or 12 books. I think the series, the cover, the jacket design is just excellent. This is Endgame, the most recent. Here's another one, Zigzag, Nightcrawlers. You can see the same basic design, but different colors, different images. I just think this is fantastic cover design. And I should give credit to the designer. The jacket designed by Drive Communications in New York. Nice work, Drive. Design my jackets anytime. And Bill Pronzini also has written a number of very good standalones. This one's fairly recent, The Violated. So, what I really like about Bill Pronzini, who, interestingly, is married to Marcia Muller, author of the Sharon McCone mysteries. So they're a mysterious couple. Bill Pronzini is a master of getting in, doing it, and getting out. And so part of my admiration for and love of Bill Pronzini is his ability to jump into the story, move it forward, I don't want to say in a linear fashion, because I don't think any really good mystery is absolutely linear, because it has to have those twists and turns and switchbacks and so forth that kind of put you on a zigzaggy path to the resolution. But it's all very cleverly plotted. In recent books, Nameless is doing a little bit less of the heavy lifting, and there are multiple stories that are told from different perspectives. But what all the novels have in common is that driving the book forward with every page and telling good mysteries. I mean, what Bill Pronzini has done so nicely is, he's been at the game so long. He's tried so many of the conventions and so many of the tropes. Like, just for example, he has a locked room mystery, very, very good. And he did one recently that is kind of a paranormal mystery. I mean, so he like flexes his muscles and tries new things, and always tells a hell of a tale. The writing is so clean, so non-pretentious, so I don't know if populist is the right word. In some quarters, populist has a negative connotation, and I don't mean it negatively. I mean it very, very positively. The writing is just, Bill is there to tell you a story and entertain you and surprise you with a good twist and bring everything to a good resolution. He does it all well. And what he also manages to do is tell his mystery stories while also exploring the characters' emotional lives, things that are going on personally with them. And he's living proof that you can tell a story and develop character and give readers a very good reading experience in a short number of pages. A lot of the books are about 220, 225 in terms of page count. They get in, they get out, they don't ever say they're welcome, and they're just so much fun to read and such fast reading. And I've mentioned in the past that I really think there's a difference between light reading and mindless reading. Bill Pronzini is not light reading, but it's very fast reading. I always read the books in 2 nights, and he's on my list of authors whose books I buy the second I get the notification from Amazon that they're out. And then I really try to not jump on it the second it arrives, and I can't resist the temptation. So give Bill Pronzini a try. I would, you don't necessarily have to read the books in order, and there are a lot of them. So there's got to be more than 25 Nameless books. I should have counted before I made this video. You can really start anywhere, and you'll see, what I'm saying is, don't worry about where you start. Go to the library, go to the bookstore, look for a title that seems intriguing or a story that you think you would like, and just start anywhere. And I guarantee you will go back for more. So thank you, Bill, for all the great reads. If you're ever in New Jersey, I'd love you to sign them. You can probably see in my bookshelf up there to the upper, those are all my Pronzini books. They take up an entire shelf. So if you're ever in New Jersey, I'd love for you to sign all of them. And tell me all your novelistic secrets so that I can share them with people on these videos. Or maybe you could make a video too, or teach a masterclass, because certainly no one does it better than you do. So that's it for me tonight, everybody. Thank you, as always, and I'll be back when the muse strikes me. And again, if you have any ideas you'd like me to pontificate about, feel free to leave comments. Okay, thanks again, everyone. Have a good night.